Good evening, and welcome to another episode of The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Perry.
I'm your host, David. Tonight we're talking about Season 5, Episode 10, Rapture. Before we continue, you can find us on Facebook, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and X as The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast.
That is correct, and as I say every single week, you should find us and follow us because we're great, we're awesome, we are a good time. And if you are tuning in tonight, you will get the first chance to enter into our contest. Again, all you have to do is go to our YouTube channel. You will go to the live section to watch the video. You will watch our video and listen for the keyword or phrase, and then you will put it in the comments. We will put everybody's name in that actually enters. We'll do the drawing for that at a later time. And then in the new year, whoever the winner is will receive the Federation medallion that you can then affix to any rounded glass container cup that you so choose. It will be completely free to you. All you have to do is win the contest. Okay. And then of course we'll reach out to you, contact you to, get your information so we can send it to you, of course. But that's it. That's all. We will be revealing that phrase later on. But before we get into the episode and contest and all the rest of it, as always, we have to check in. So, David, how has your week been?
It's been good. It's been good. I finished War and Peace this week. It was really good, but my goodness, dense. I'm not kidding, Perry. The last 50 pages of the book are a whole college paper on the nature of power and free will. So at the end of a long book of fiction, you get 50 pages about does humanity have free will or not?
Hmm.
Fascinating, but certainly a very different ending to a book than I think most people would ever experience. So it's really good. I really enjoyed it. I also started. I watched the BBC 8-part miniseries with my folks. It was really good. The BBC miniseries was good. It kept to the plot of the book really well. The only problem with TV shows and movies is that they can't show you the inner lives of the characters. And a lot of what the book is understanding what's going on inside the characters. So you're getting all the plot, the outer plot, but it would have been you do miss something by watching it as opposed to reading it. But yeah, that was kind of the big thing for me, other than work and Christmas and all that.
Yes.
How about you? Anything new with you?
Real quick before we get into that, I just want to ask you, since you said it was basically a dissertation on whether or not man has free will. Where do you come down on that? Do you feel like after reading this, you can definitively say, yes, we absolutely have free will, free determination, whatever, or no, it's all a sham, and we're all just cogs in the
Oh
greater
no,
wheel?
I believe we have free will. I mean, certainly my beliefs would suggest that. I mean, even I don't think you can explain life, anything, if you don't have the idea of free will. Even if you come down on the side of we're a bunch of chemical meat bags that are just responding to stimuli, that doesn't answer the question of justice, answer the question of, reality, human connection. There's so many things about life that are only understood by the idea of choice. Now, I'm not saying we have unlimited free choice. Obviously not. We don't have unlimited free choice. I'm not Superman. I can't fly. Just because I can't fly and shoot
Boy,
lasers out
that'd
of
be
my
great.
eyes doesn't mean I don't have free will. But our free will is limited, certainly. But we certainly have choices that are put in front of us. And I mean, the Christian, the whole point of Christianity is in part that we're supposed to gain control of ourselves. Yes, there are things about ourselves that there are times when we feel like we can't control ourselves. Like, oh, I'm hungry, I need to eat. Well, the whole reason that fasting is a thing is the idea that you have mind over matter. Your body tells you you're hungry, and you
Discipline.
don't. You discipline your mind against your body.
Yeah.
That yes, I might be hungry, but for like 24 hours, I'm not going to eat anything, as a way to express self control. So yes, I do. What? How do you fall? Do you have an opinion either way?
Um, I definitely think that we have free will. I think that just the total chaos of our world seems to suggest that we have free will because, you know, in if you just look at nature, there's an inherent order to things, but then when you look at humanity, there's a lot of chaos. So
Right.
it's like if we didn't have free will, we would also follow a certain order.
Mm,
There'd be a certain, there'd be a way to observe us from a very, kind of distant logical standpoint. But there's so much about humanity, not even looking at like you were saying, like justice and everything else, but just looking at the way that our society has ebbed and flowed over its entire existence, that so much of it is just like it's a sheer luck, it's a
right.
miracle, whatever, that some of these things happened and
Right.
things didn't happen. And so much, again, there's no pattern, there's no, whatever. So yeah, I'm just like, to me that is enough to indicate that we have free will. Now, there could be somebody who might say that there is, order in our chaos, and if you
Right.
look the right way, you may find it. I just, I guess, haven't looked at it that way, so I don't know.
Perry, I just want to say your answer just now was fascinating because you were basically right on where Tolstoy was at the end of War and Peace. He
I've never
basically
read
and
it.
he basically, I mean, he was kind of coming at the other angle. Tolstoy kind of concludes that there must be universal laws that control humanity's like reaction to life, and like the law of gravity, if we could understand it, then we would understand that free will is not free, it's bound by laws. I mean, he kind of goes both ways, which is kind of why the whole end of the book is just kind of like, whoa, what's going on? Because he basically
Mm,
just rants for 50 pages um, about free will and power and all this. But it's interesting you said it the way you did because he basically says, yeah, if we could understand humanity and the way they make choices, maybe we could quantify it. But because we can't
yeah,
quantify it, we don't, or we
yeah.
do.
There's just so many things, and like even in our own, day and age, and like now, especially, I think the easiest one to point out would be like, certain, outbursts of violence, that we see.
Mhm.
It's one thing to be able to like track the escalation to war, which that we've done many, many times. But
Right,
when you're talking about just random outbursts of violence and people, like, school shootings, for example, there doesn't really ever seem to be any kind of plan with that, or there's no escalation that anyone can really point to. It's shocking, it's sudden, it's graphic, it's terrible.
right,
Those are those truly chaotic moments like that stand out to me as, again, this it's that was someone making a choice, that was a
right,
person making a terrible choice, but still a choice that none of us can fathom and really understand.
right,
So those are the reasons why, like, I hate to use violence as an example, but it's probably the easiest one as a way to say, yeah, we clearly have free will, because again, nature would not have so much abject violence without there being a point,
right,
you know.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an
That was
interesting book and an
Yes.
interesting conclusion.
Now you
Um,
kind of got me wanting to read it. I don't know if I will ever, have the time.
it's
uh
certainly long. I mean, Count of Monte Cristo is only 100 pages shorter, so I think if you could get through that, you could get through War and Peace. But
okay.
to be very clear, War and Peace does not have the same sort of structure as a storytelling mechanism as like Count of Monte Cristo. Count of Monte Cristo, there's a huge injustice done at the beginning of
Yeah,
the book, and then you're driven through ups and downs of plot. The point of War and Peace is it follows almost a decade's worth, more than a decade's worth of several people's lives. So
it's
it's
kind of
more.
like the way you describe it. It reminds me. It's kind of like that century's version of like what we would watch now as like a docu series. So it's a historical docu-series on this particular event, which we would now watch that as several parts of like a Netflix miniseries special, but
Well,
you're
it's
reading
it
it.
is the most straight up historical fiction
Yeah.
I've ever read for sure. But when I say historical fiction, I mean there are literal historical figures in the book as characters. Now they're not the main characters, but they are certainly followed in the book.
Okay.
And when I say it's a historical fiction, I mean it's set in its physical time and place. Leo Tolstoy is making a point about that time and place. It's not just, oh, here's a time, here's a setting. He is saying something about the historical setting with his book, and it's really enjoyable. It's a sad book. It's a book about people living lives and making mistakes, but it doesn't have quite those massive ups and downs of like Counts of Monte Cristo in terms of just
Okay.
pure plot. It's not Lord of the Rings or Star Wars with, I mean, it is in some ways because it's about, the invasion of Russia, but the point of the book is that actually it's the small moments amongst all the big moments that matter, to kind of summarize some of the themes.
Okay.
Um, so it's really good. I enjoyed it more than I initially expected. I was kind of like, I'll read it because it's something that I think would make sense because I just read Napoleon, about Napoleon, the biography. But I'm glad I did because I was reading the book, and as I said last week, knowing the history of the period and now reading a book about the history of the period from a fictional perspective was really enjoyable. So yeah, great time. After I finished reading that, I did pick up Charles Dickens. I have a book on his Christmas stories, as like Christmas Carol. And I've read Christmas Carol before. And I started reading one of the other ones, but it was really boring. It was not nearly as good as Christmas Carol. It was like really hard to get into. And so I just read a summary of it online. And I was like, that doesn't sound a lot of fun. But
Hmm.
starting the day after Christmas, time for Nemesis games, baby. So
Good. Okay.
yeah.
So really quick to summarize what I've been up to. I was been much of the same, which is moving, but I've had to speed things up a lot on the moving front.
Oh.
Several things have changed with scheduling, not just for myself, but for extended family members as well. My mother is getting ready to have this pretty intensive surgery, and then of course that will mean she will need my assistance
Mm,
for with her rehab and recuperation and so forth. So I want to make sure that I'm available and not still having to
move
run
so much.
around a whole lot. So I'm speeding everything up. So hopefully we'll be finished by right around like New Year's. Like I'm hoping to be done and then ringing in the new year fully at my new place and not having to go back for anything. So this coming week is going to be like the make or break on that because
Mm,
it means I'm going to have to make one or two trips in the middle of the week up
right.
here to
Mhm.
drop some other things off, and then
Right.
if possible, I don't even know if they're going to be open, but rent a U-Haul to get the last of the stuff.
Right.
So we'll see. um Nemesis, on the front of Nemesis Games, I went ahead and purchased the sixth book, and it arrived
Nice.
today, as a matter
All
of fact. So
right.
I'm quite excited to get into this, and this is Babylon's Ashes.
Mm,
So I'm really looking forward to both being able to discuss the fifth book, and then getting into the sixth book. And the main reason I'm so excited about the sixth book is because, as we all know, the show ended in the sixth season, which is supposed to be mainly the sixth book, but then they also smash some stuff from the last books a little bit into the final season.
season.
They
Yeah.
did not cover everything, and that's kind of been like the big, are they going to come back? Are they going to do, more of the series? Are they going to do a movie? What are they going to do to truly finish this out?
Right.
And so now we're finally getting into the territory of the book where it's not been covered by the show. So I'm
Right.
just really excited to, make those comparisons, connections, and then go beyond that and see just kind of how this world continues.
Right.
Also, I want to then do a little bit of a follow up with the authors of this series. And, I guess we will answer that question when we get through the final book as to whether or not there is any more in this universe that they've created, if
Right.
there's any more that they're going to be doing with the protomolecule or not. I On the one hand, I hope that we get there and find out that there's so much potential and they just haven't written it yet, and that maybe they're just waiting to do like another series of this. But I'm betting it's not going to be that. But anyway, don't want to jump so far ahead now. I'm speculating about other nonsense. But
Right.
suffice it to say, I've really been enjoying this series. I actually did finish Nemesis Games. I
Nice. Okay.
enjoyed it. Yeah, I
Good.
enjoyed it more than I thought that I was going to. As we had talked about before, I don't like it when they work so hard to establish an ensemble cast and then split them up,
Yeah.
and then they have their own whatevers, because I like to interplay. I like how, you have very dominant personalities, and obviously, submissive and intermediary personality, whatever else, and seeing how those dynamics all work together. And then
Right.
when they all splinter and now they're having to make their own decisions and do their own thing, to me, it doesn't have the same kind of resonance, I guess, to say,
Hmm.
as it would when they're together and having to struggle with presenting their points of view and making their arguments and countering other people's arguments in the debate that comes from a group, a team making a decision and moving forward.
Right.
But there is also a lot of extra world building in the book. You also find out about some other characters that we knew about from the show, and so this is kind of like their first outing to a certain degree. So we're getting to see them, and obviously they differ from what we see on the show. But I don't think it was necessarily bad. But we'll get into all that as well. Um, but yeah, basically, I'm looking forward to all of that. And also, now we get to say officially that David, after watching this episode, can now watch Star Trek First Contact. So
Oh
we will
boy.
be doing a Trek after, not Trek, but a uh,
These
Fire Caves
fire keeps
After
after
Dark.
dark. Yeah.
Excuse me, a Fire Caves After Dark special for First Contact. So if you are interested at all, watch First Contact. We will announce when we're going to do that, of course, and that's going to be what the whole show is about. It's about the movie First Contact and how it kind of shapes what happens in Trek to come.
Oh.
Now, the reason that I was making David wait to watch the episode or to watch the movie over the episode was because for me, it's the uniform change. And this is the one that I've been wanting to talk about forever. Now, they even highlighted in the episode, there's even a scene where Bashir's like, tell me, does my uniform look brighter to
Brighter.
you? It was a flagrant, hey, look, things have
Yeah.
changed. And they
Yeah.
just were, whatever. But these to me are the Apex Trek uniforms. These
They look
are the
fantastic.
best.
Yeah.
These are the best the uniforms will ever be. I've seen
Right.
what comes after this with Discovery and and I've seen the throwbacks and the redesign of the throwbacks for like Strange New Worlds and so forth. And while they're nice, don't get me wrong, this look right here it's perfect. It's so clean, it's to the point, it's not bulky, it's great. They look great.
Yeah.
And Cisco
We
is
should
wearing
take
he
two
was just
seconds and talk about them because they look
oh, we're
good.
going to.
Well, you want to wait and talk about them, or you
Yeah,
want to knock it
so we're
out
gonna
real quick?
yeah, no, we'll
Okay.
okay, well,
Okay.
so we'll wait. We'll get there because
Okay.
that
All
scene is important
right.
where the whole does this look different. So we'll get there.
Yeah. Okay.
So yes, we're not here to talk about any of the other nonsense. We are here to talk about Deep Space Nine, of course, and this episode, Rapture. What a great title. I'm excited for this episode. I've been excited for this episode. This is just great, fantastic. It's a phenomenal job. So much stuff is happening here, and it's all so important. If
Right.
you don't watch this episode, literally the things that come next just don't have the same impact. They just don't. This episode is very important, and it doesn't seem that way, but I'm going to point it out to you. I'm going to make sure you understand why this episode is key to everything that comes next. Okay.
Right. So
So,
you're recapping it, no
oh,
question.
okay. I was like, okay, I was going to ask you. I was going to ask you, but I'll do it. I will definitely do it.
Go for
All
it. Go
right.
for it.
So, this episode, again, Rapture, it starts with Cisco, Kira, and Dax are sitting in the ward room, not war room. I know that gets confused because of later, but anyway, ward room. And there is a painting in front of them, and it is a painting of an ancient Bajoran city called Bahala. Now, the history of Bahala is that it was a major hub on Bajor some 20,000 years ago, and something happened to it that caused it to be lost to time. And in particular, in the painting, there is a display of a giant spire that Cisco tells the story of, and it's been cobbled together by all these extremely tight-fitting stones, and it's got these placards on the side, which are supposed to mark the position of Bahala in relation to the stars. And because the painting is the only true reference that they have, or only remaining reference that Bahala ever actually existed, according to our mythology, it's essentially a myth. Um, there, since the spire contains this record and this painting is of the spire, there's no way to truly tell where Bahala is. Cisco orders to have the thing scanned, stored in the computer's memory. They're going to send the painting on. He slowly but surely becomes a bit obsessed with this painting. He goes to the holodeck. He has an actual spire recreated. He blows up the image. He's doing his, photo manipulation that they do in the, the 24th century equivalent of CSI on the painting, and he's able to clarify some of the images, and he is making some headway on this puzzle. Quark comes in, interrupts him, letting him know he's basically been in there for several hours. Cisco asked to have the program saved. Quark doesn't save it. He kind of pisses Cisco off or annoys him a little bit. So Cisco decides to do it himself. At which point the whole holographic system and everything else uh, explodes, and he gets electrified, and that's kind of the beginning of the episode. Next part that we see is he's in sick bay, and Bashir is telling him about some polarization of his neural whatever's in his head, basically making him see sharper. The colors are brighter, edges are sharper, everything's crisper, cleaner, which is a nice wink and a nod to the uniforms, because those uniforms were definitely crisp and clean. And it was nice little, like I said, wink and a nod there. But he basically telling him, hey, yeah, you were electrocuted, but you're all right. Things are going to seem pretty awesome spectrally for you for a while. If you have any side effects, come back. You know where where I'll be.
Right.
So he goes off. He continues on this kind of uh, working on the spire. He
Hmm.
has dinner with Jake. Jake cooks for him. Um, and through the meal, he begins to see these shapes.
Hmm.
He's able to put it together, and eventually he is able to determine where Bahala is. Like, he's got at least got a good idea. At
Hmm.
the same time, Cassidy Yates, now free from prison, has come back and is ready to resume her life again. Jake makes a statement about how she's been gone for 6 months. She's paid her debt to society, and that Ben should give her a chance. But at that time, Ben wasn't really listening to him.
Right.
She shows up in the holodeck. He kisses her quite passionately for a woman he hasn't seen in 6 months.
Hmm.
And then they're off to Bajor, where he does find Bahala. Now, while all this is happening, it's important to note that the Federation has decided that they are finally ready to accept Bajor into the Federation. The petition is got the gold stamp, and let's move ahead and officially formalize the induction of this new planet into the Federation.
Right.
Now, there's a celebration going on because if you're in Starfleet, that's like your favorite thing to do, is to have a new civilization join the Federation collective, right? And so, Cisco, not Cisco, but Worf and Dax are in Quark's. Quark does his own little display. He gets part of it wrong. But overall, again, they're having a party. Um, Cisco, again, that's why he had gone back up to the holodeck and whatever else. And now he's off to Bahala, or to Bajor, to find Bahala, and he does. Admiral Watley is the admiral who first tells Ben about the acceptance of Bajor into the Federation, and then he shows up in order to start getting preparation done for the induction ceremony and all that. But meanwhile, Cisco starts having these visions. He's having these kind of out of body experiences. In
Yep.
fact, he has what Kira calls a Paktem Far, which is a sacred vision, and it was basically him saying how he could kind of see how everything fit together, their whole story and what everything was. He almost understood it all, and that seems to be what the visions are doing for him. He is starting to have some other side effects from this explosion now. Beyond just visions, he's also being, racked with pain from increasingly severe headaches.
Yep.
Um, Kai Wynn, our favorite Kai Wynn, shows up because of the induction ceremony, of course. At
Right.
first, she's really hesitant about being on board with the induction, but then after Cisco finds Bahala, she's like, "Oh no, he's definitely got to be the emissary. I'm going to
Right.
get out of this guy's way. And
Right.
she and Kira exchange a very interesting conversation in
Yep.
which they talk about the occupation and how they both experienced it and how
Right.
they both came through it. And
Right.
we're going to get to that conversation because, like I said, very interesting little bit there. And I have to say now, I'll tease it now with, I hate to admit that I agreed with Kai Wynn, like, because she
Yeah.
bothers me.
Yeah. There's
Um,
definitely a turning point with her character in
yeah.
this episode. Go ahead. Yeah.
Um, so now Cisco is he's trying to figure out what all the visions mean, and he's trying to, basically kind of hold off Watley a little bit because Watley's ready to like pressure him into like, let's get this done, let's keep this moving. You're our point man, and the ceremony is great and all, but now the real work begins.
Right.
Bajor's military has to be folded into Starfleet. We got to pick council representatives. We've got like, there's just so much stuff that needs to be done, and you're our guy for it. And here you are, you know, off doing archaeological things. You're not Picard. Like, get back on the station, do your work.
Right. Yep.
Um, so so Cisco again tries to put him off a little bit, but then when he finally does come back to the station, he's like super, emissary now, and he's having visions for people and telling people where they need to be and where they need to go. He comments on the admiral's been fighting with his son, and he's like, "Oh, don't worry about it. Your kid forgives you," and so forth. They give Ben a workup, and they realize that his situation has deteriorated far worse than they initially suspected. And
Right.
now it's to the point where if he doesn't have this surgery to correct this, he's going to die.
Right.
But Cisco doesn't want to correct it. He wants the visions to continue because it's become increasingly important that he see the whole picture.
Right.
He talks with Jake and Cassidy about it, and they're just really kind of just shocked and upset that he's gonna, risk his life for these visions that they feel are just silly.
Right.
Um, but he decides anyway he's gonna go through with it. Kai Wynn comes into their quarters. Jake is shocked, to say the least, that that she's there and that Cisco has tried to decided to place his trust in her.
Hmm.
They go, which I'm assuming they go to her quarters because I didn't. The room that they were in for the vision, the orb experience, didn't make sense to me at first because like they tried to shroud it, and at first I thought
Right.
they had gone like to the temple or something. But then when they do the like background shot or whatever, you can clearly see like furniture and a living space there. So I'm assuming they just went to her quarters where she had the
Yeah.
orb
They
set up
just
for them to
had
be.
the orb of prophecy with them.
Yeah, like, I mean, I guess since she's the Kai, she can just like take it wherever she wants. And so,
Right.
yeah, she just, that's what she did. And he's like, he's having a whole, pain attack and everything else. But he goes through with the orb experience. Um, Meanwhile, again, the Federation is ready to move on with the induction ceremony. They tried to wait for Ben, but he's just not available. The orb experience could take quite a long time, so Kai Wynn says. So they begin the ceremony, and they're just getting started when a very crazed, deranged Cisco bursts into the room and takes everybody's attention and basically says that Bajor cannot join the Federation now. It's too soon. They have to wait. If Bajor joins the Federation now, Bajor will be destroyed. So, of course,
Right.
to the room of very, first awestruck and then panicked Bajorans, their emissary telling them not to do the thing, they're not going to do it. So they
Right.
don't. Bajor does not join the Federation at this time. Admiral Watley is quite upset, and depending on who you talk to, rightly so.
Mhm.
But because of Ben's status with the Bajoran people, they can't really do anything to him.
Right.
So, so if they want Bajor to join the Federation at all, they're going to have to basically leave Ben alone. He gets a pass.
Right.
And so Ben just kind of tells the admiral, he does tell the admiral, he's like, Bajor will join the Federation, just not right now. They can't do
Right.
it right now because
Right.
something's coming.
Right.
And so, based upon Ben's visions, we know that there is something coming in regards to the Dominion and Cardassia and how all this is getting ready to play out. We don't have all the answers yet, but we know that something major is coming, and Ben has kind of been our focal point for seeing that.
Right.
They end up having the surgery. They correct it. Ben wakes up from the surgery. He's distraught that they took away his visions. And he eventually goes home. And it seems like Jake was kind of afraid that maybe his dad was going to be mad, upset with him about what he did. But in classic the Cisco family tradition, it does seem like Ben is a little bit hesitant at first to kind of come back to them initially. But then
Sure.
once they're together, they're just,
Yeah.
great family unit. It was a great way to end it, and the inclusion of Cassidy kind of solidifying, at least unofficially, that she is, in this family with them together. That's the three of them now, and that is essentially how the episode ends. With the hand holding and the whatever, and that's it. Now, yes, those are the highlights. If you want to go and get the full details, which you should, this is a fantastic episode. You can go watch it. You can watch all this episode and all the other Trek episodes on Paramount Plus, or as I like to call it at my house, Star Trek Plus, because that's the only thing I really watch on Paramount is Star Trek. So there you go.
Excuse me. Yeah.
Um, so yes, that is it. Do you think I hit all the necessary points here?
Yeah. The only thing I don't think you quite mentioned was that Kai Wynn had expressed that she didn't want to join the Federation. It's only been 5 years since Bajor became free, and she's afraid that the Federation is going to cause them to lose their identity. Of course, we also know Kai Wynn's kind of power hungry, so it's more like you just don't want to lose. You don't want to have to answer to
Yeah.
anybody. So that's why the conversation her and Kira is important because she says, "I never really believed that Cisco was the emissary, and now obviously he is. I can't deny it anymore. I'm going to listen to him." And I accept that if we're going to join the Federation because he wants us to, then that's the right thing to do. So when it turns out that Cisco comes in and says, "No, don't do it," she's kind of vindicated, but not in the way or for the reasons that
Not
we
in the,
would
right.
expect it. Yeah.
And she also alludes to the fact that she always thought of Cisco as her enemy, which we knew based upon the way that she interacted with him. But this is the first time that she kind of roundabout admits it, because she says in one of the later scenes, she says, before I came to the station, before all this happened, my path was clear, but now I
Mm,
don't know who my enemies are, which is again her saying at one point before all this, it was clear to her that Cisco and basically everybody on the station were enemies to her and her goals.
right.
And now she's not so sure because she has to admit that he is a person who is touched and guided by the prophets.
Right.
So
Yeah.
there you go.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, first impressions of this episode.
Yeah. It's definitely a really good one because it's interesting. I mean, Avery Brooks is the best actor on the show, just hands down.
Yeah.
Everyone else does a great job in their part, in their role. But whenever Avery Brooks is allowed to
Be
take
center.
Yes, I mean he takes his scenes and he makes something of them. When he's having to when he's in front of the orb of prophecy and he's experiencing these headaches, Avery Brooks, man, he's shaking. He's got a headache. You can
Yeah.
tell that Cisco's dealing with something. When he comes into the room afterward and he's, as you said, kind of crazed, same thing. Um, but
Yeah,
more so than all that,
when he bursts through the door and stumbles into the wall and is trying to
yeah,
push and struggle, it's like, yeah, he's definitely enjoying the physical
right,
nature here of this
yeah.
scene.
Exactly. But more importantly than all that, which is great, is those small little moments. When Avery Brooks talks in his low whisper, oh, man,
That
that's
that
a
low
musical
threatening
voice.
rumble, yeah,
Oh,
that
yeah.
little rumble. Yeah, I know what you're
Yeah.
talking about. Avery Brooks has a great voice and
Yeah.
he uses it very well.
Yes. It's,
I will say that I think that for Star Trek they do a pretty good job of casting people with quite clear, distinctive voices. They're
right.
just unmistakable. I mean, I can't think of anybody else who could ever even come close to approximating Patrick Stewart or
Mm,
Leonard Nimoy,
mm,
DeForest Kelly, Avery Brooks, Michael Dorn.
yeah.
These people have really great voices that are just so. Uh, I mean, you could hear them on other shows, and it's just like even before you see them, you hear them, and you instantly know who
Hmm.
that is.
Right.
They've done a great job of cornering that market on people because I don't care what Patrick Stewart's in ever.
Hmm.
If I hear his voice, I know that that's him. I don't have to see it. I know that that's him.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. but yeah, I just like the emphasis for me of him in those kind of quieter moments. He really starts to enjoy this little puzzle of the Bajoran mono. What is it? The spire.
Yeah,
I
when oh, you're
mean,
talking about when Kira comes in and wakes him up from his Paktum Far, and
well,
he's
there's an
all,
yeah, there's
"I
that
could
moment.
smell the incense burning on the
Yeah,
wind. I could hear the bells ringing in the
yes,
temple." Yeah, yeah.
right, yeah, but I mean, as you pointed out in your recap, it's Picard who's supposed to be the amateur archaeologist, but
Mhm.
no, Cisco gives him a run for his money.
Yeah.
He's totally into it. And this is the first time. Well, not the first time. Maybe this is the first time he's really been kind of abandoned to his love of Bajor. Like we've seen him learn about Bajor and enjoy it, but this is the first time where he really embraces anything to do
Yeah,
with being the emissary.
I think that's the key word there. That this is the first time we've seen him really embrace his role.
Right,
When we first see Cisco in season one in the pilot, and they're like, "You're going to be the emissary," he's completely just not into it. And
right,
then over time, it's more like, "I'm not for this, but if it's a tool I can use, I will take it." And then
right.
eventually
And
that
use it
becomes,
very gently. Never
yes,
abuse it. Yeah.
and then it becomes kind of a, I sort of kind of tolerate this, but I'm not going to indulge, I'm not going to use it. He schedules, different drills and stuff to make sure he's not available for festivities and stuff that are supposed to be in his honor. We see him do things like that. And now, we saw the episode where he willingly gave up the title of emissary and let
Yes.
that other guy take it. And when he realized that guy was doing, basically doing it wrong, he
Right.
was ready to assume the mantle again.
Right.
And now finally he's like, I'm the emissary. I'm getting pictures dropped off just for me because I'm the emissary. And I'm gonna, go and study the spire because I can. And like, yeah,
Right.
this is the first time we see him. He's just really, really into it. He's not fighting it at all. And
Right.
and even to the point where when other people try to throw up roadblocks for him being in that mindset, he distances himself from them. He pushes them away. He keeps them away.
Yes.
Even his
I
own son.
need to do this.
Yes.
Yeah. Even his own son, as you said, like when he comes out of having the surgery, he is distraught. There
Mhm.
is kind of initially like a wall between him and Jake. Like you did this to me, kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's the one thing I think you kind of forgot to mention. Like there's a big old kind of argument at the end of the episode. Cisco's dying. Do we obey his wishes to
Yes,
let
and
him
and
keep
Jake
his
has to
visions?
and Jake has to make the choice.
Right.
And Jake is like, yeah, I know that you want to see. That's what he says. I know that you want to see this through, but I need you. And he
Yes.
tells Julian to do it, do the
Right.
surgery. You
Right.
know.
Exactly.
Um,
And that's a very poignant moment because, of course, we know that they love each other, and that's why it's also kind of heartbreaking to see Cisco kind of losing himself a bit to these visions, uh, as both Jake and what's her name,
Cassidy.
Cassidy are trying to call him back. But I want to go back real quick. The thing also, it's not just that he embraces being the emissary. This is the first time he seems to really fully embrace the like Bajoran culture. Like we've seen him
Hmm.
go to Bajor to see this thing or that thing. He's going on vacation, but this is the first time he's like, I know what those symbols mean. I know what like he is passionate before the emissary stuff kicks in, about Bajor as like a people, as a history. Not that he hasn't been interested. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that his level of interest and passion and dedication has reached a new level, and the emissary kind of rising up within him is an example of that kind of coming together and taking hold, which is again exemplified when he's walking on the station and he's a messiah figure. He's looking at
Yeah,
people.
he's
He's
very
like,
much. Yeah,
your
he's.
seed crop is going to do well this year. Tell your son, or you and your son are going to be back together. Very, I mean, again, like part of me is like that looks a lot like what Jesus was doing in some ways, but in other ways, it almost feels a little like a little sleazy. I'm like, that's
I'm
exactly
sure.
how.
I'm sure they were trying to draw this kind of messianic parallel.
Oh, for sure.
I'm sure that that was the point. Now, again, this is one of those situations with with all sci-fi, but I know in particular with Star Trek, they do tend to struggle with, which is the representation of religion and spirituality, especially
Right.
when they're having to create that for a whole other race and culture. And they borrow a lot, obviously, from,
Right.
Earth and Earth
Hmm.
religions and try to cobble things together. So there's going to be a
Sure.
lot of things they don't get right or that they have to blatantly change and so
Right.
forth. And I think that, like it's one of those things like if you not necessarily hate to say it, but if you are a religious person, I really feel like you probably have to like get out of yourself to still
You
enjoy
do,
an episode like this.
and there's certainly that. There's certainly part of me going like, okay, this is a fictional setting. We're doing fictional stuff. It's always, I guess, I've realized part of the reason why it kind of gets at me a little bit more is like if we were in a purely fictional setting, this isn't Earth in the future. This isn't to the year. This isn't the century of the 24th century. This is future history. This is if we were in a fictional universe altogether. Again, Lord of the Rings has its own fictional mythology, but it's entirely fictional. So that's my point. Is like
Hmm.
part of me is like, well, Earth history has history to it. So we go into anyway. I want to just back up and say that um, the Cisco moment of him walking around talking to people felt a little funny, but I get it. And part of what's been interesting is to see the idea. I mean, if the prophets are outside of time and space, then a lot of what happens there makes sense. He's saying, I'm now connected to beings outside of time and space, and therefore they're able to have knowledge about things that I'm now able to communicate. So it is an interesting moment.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it doesn't fit with the characters or with the fictional history here. It actually does. And it is a loss when he is no longer able to see the visions. So
it
yeah,
was that moment. I thought about that because obviously I went back and watched this episode again, and I thought about that, like trying to imagine that for a second. Like you are a person who has this kind of clarity, right? And then it's suddenly taken away from you, and the profound sense of loss that that would have generated. I couldn't imagine. Like I really did try, but I couldn't imagine there being anything that would be comparable to that. Um, and so yeah, just like I think that they did a great job of kind of exemplifying his his sense of loss here for that. And I did
right,
like the fact that when he did come back to Jake and Cassidy at the end, he, seemed hesitant. He seemed like he wasn't sure he wanted to be there. And it wasn't until they made, you know, physical contact that he was like, yes,
yeah,
this is my family. This is where I need to be, you
right,
know. Because that's also been a major part of Ben's story. Like as we've watched the story of Ben Cisco unfold, we've always talked about the cornerstone of the man is the fact that he is very much invested in his family
right,
and in the growth and development of his son. And now we see Jake at 18 years old here. He's, from our standpoint, Jake is a grown man, but at the same time, it's like he's still a kid. He's still a boy compared to his father, and there's still a lot he can learn from his father and experiences they can have together and things like that.
right,
And and then he's just now kind of really getting the chance to grow whatever this is with Cassidy. She's just now gotten back, and it seems like he's very much into her and them continuing the relationship. He tells her he
hmm
loves her. He
right,
obviously, as I said earlier, he kisses her quite passionately when they are reunited for the first time.
right.
It almost seems like he's propositioning her at one point because he kisses her, and then when they break the kiss, he's like, "What are you doing for the next few hours?"
yeah,
This is like, "Whoa, boy, slow
yeah,
down. I know.
yeah.
I guess you've been, saving up for the past 6 months. We get it, but
Yeah, saving for a dinner out,
yeah,
and a
yeah,
dinner and a movie.
yeah, yeah, uh, yeah. That's it. Saving his latinum for a dinner date.
Yeah,
Sorry,
exactly.
guess I got to keep it PG-13. But yeah, so I mean, and even she seems a little taken aback at first, and then he's like, "Yeah, nah, we gotta.
Get to
I've been
Bajor.
saving for my
Yeah,
vacation to take you to Bahala, so come on, let's go."
yeah,
but yeah, I mean, it's just like he's very committed to these individuals, and he wants them to be with him, and wants to be with them. So yeah, I did love that moment, where he just kind of had that sense of loss, and then we see the recovery after.
Right.
Um, so now there's another scene that I want to talk about, that we kind of hinted at earlier, and it is the scene where, um, it's shortly after the discovery of Bahala. Kai Wynn comes to Kira, and she's in the security office with Odo and Worf, and they're discussing the arrangements for where the various captains and admirals are gonna, have their quarters or whatever. And so
Hmm.
she comes in and she asks to speak to Kira. They walk out onto the promenade, and she's just like, hey, do you know Captain Cisco? I want to know because I want to ask his forgiveness. I realize now he truly is the emissary, and I've always been against him, and I
Right.
want to no longer be in his way. I
Right.
want to follow the path. So,
Right.
do you think he will forgive me? And Kira's like, I'm just really surprised at you for saying this,
Hmm.
because basically it's kind of like the words that Kira doesn't say, which all want her to say, is, "I'm really surprised because you've always been such a bitch." But
Yeah.
you know,
PG
um,
13.
hey, we're towing the line here. We're towing the line.
I guess if it's on national TV, you're going PG, not even PG
Yes.
13. But yeah, yeah. Keep going. Sorry.
Um, but yeah, so then she's asking him, and then she's asking these questions, and then you know, Kywin turns to her and basically just kind of lays it out for her. She's like, you guys in the resistance think that you all single-handedly fought the Cardassians and freed Bajor, but you know, I was in a prison camp as well. I was a prisoner for 5 years, and the Cardassians were arresting everybody who was still openly teaching about the prophets. So
Mhm.
I was in a prison camp for 5 years as well, and I was beaten many times. What she says, I can remember every beating I received, and all I had was my faith, while you had your weapons. You
Right.
know, so it's kind of a because Kira's kind of calling her out at first, being like, I just kind of always thought you were a coward, basically. It takes great, that's what Sakira says. It takes courage
Courage.
to admit when
Yes.
you're wrong.
Yes, is what she
And,
says.
and,
And Kai Wynn is very offended by that. She's like,
yeah,
I had
very,
courage, not the kind
yeah.
of courage you expressed, but I had courage. Yeah.
So it's a great scene because
Yeah.
once again, Louise Fletcher, or, Kai Wynn, she's a phenomenal actress. She just absolutely is.
And we
She's
haven't seen
great.
her in a while.
We
It's
have
been a
not
while.
seen her in a while. And as always, whenever she shows up, she delivers. She
Right.
100% delivers, and she
Right.
was great in this scene. And as much as I hate Kai Wynn, I had to agree with her in this, because it's like we do forget that it's so easy to forget, because Kai Wynn is such an ambitious and also malicious individual,
Mm.
that it's easy to forget that she was also oppressed and subjugated to these horrific tortures and brutalizations and so forth. And she points out, like, that she wasn't a part of a resistance cell. She
Right.
wasn't running through the hills and shooting Cardassians and whatever else. She was just a spiritual leader. So all she
Yeah.
had was her
Right.
prayers to get her through. And
Right.
it's just like, can you imagine what that would do to a person
Right.
when you choose to not fight back, but you instead take the beatings, you take the torture, you take these things day in, day out for however long, and you have no idea when the occupation is going to end. It's been going on for 50 years. What makes you think it's not going to go on for 50 more?
Right.
And she's just doing this thing. And then, yeah, for Kira to kind of smack her in the face about having courage, it obviously stung her, but I mean,
Yeah.
I listened to it and I was like, I mean, she's absolutely right. Like, that's how I thought. That's exactly my first thought, and I was like, she's absolutely right. And then my next thought was, damn, I hate that she's right. Like, I don't like her so much, but she's right.
Well, what's funny about that scene is the reason that scene is so great is because Kai Wynn does express, no, I've had courage, but the problem is that Kira should have said it takes humility to admit when you're wrong, because that has been Kai Wynn's problem the whole time. She
Yeah,
hasn't been a very humble person. She hasn't been very modest. I mean, on one hand, if we understand her character as someone who takes her faith seriously and has been aggressive in defending it from what she thinks are threats. Like, for example, why is a foreigner, an alien, the emissary? Cisco isn't a Bajoran. Why is he the one who gets to claim the mantle of emissary? It should be a Bajoran, right? That kind of thing makes sense on some level. But I imagine that part of what she as a character is experiencing is that being the Kai demands things of her, and it also demands that when she's in a public spotlight for one, so she has to kind of be on, her performance kind of has to be on, if you will, a bit more. But she also has to like really take to heart a lot of the things that she might preach to other people, like trust in the prophets. Well, trust in the prophets. If the emissary is Cisco and that's been proven beyond a doubt, are you going to follow your own words, or are you going to prove yourself a hypocrite? And so it's not that she wasn't courageous throughout her life trying to do what she thought was right, being a faithful Bajoran to her beliefs, but it's that she's experienced a new level of humility and modesty that hasn't been there before, and it makes Kai Wynn a more interesting character.
It
I'm
really
more, I
it actually made her, again, I hate that I'm gonna say this, it made her likable in this
yes,
episode.
right.
I hated that I felt
But
sympathetic
that's
towards
good
her.
writing, which is why
It
you love the
really
show.
it really it was. I was just like, because I don't like her. I've never liked her. We're
Yeah,
gonna see more things coming up, and I feel like, and I know I'm not the only one. There's enough stuff out there in Trekdom where people are like, "Oh, she's such a great character to love to hate," you
right,
know. But yeah, it's because of moments like this where you, for a long, like she says, you kind of knew who the enemy was,
right,
and now it's not clear because
right,
she's this whole episode she was so understanding and supportive, and she got out of Cisco's way, which is what we were wanting all along. And what the point she makes to Kira is 100% valid, and it's just like it makes you reframe how you look at her, at least for the time being, because it's like, yeah, she was only ever interested in what was the best for Bajor. She wants what's best for Bajor, which is what you want in not just a spiritual leader, but in a leader of your people. You want
right,
someone who is trying to put your best interests first, put them
right,
forward. And if there's one thing we can say is consistent about Kai Wen, that would be it. Now she does have her own ambition. She definitely wants to keep herself in a position of power and influence. That's another reason why she bucked up against Cisco, because she was finally starting to get what she wanted. She was the head Vedic, that was going to be next in line to be Kai and all this stuff. And then all of a sudden, here comes this alien foreigner who is now the emissary, a position that is even more revered and sacred than Kai.
yeah,
And it just, definitely, I could see that burning you up. If you think about something that you've been going for
hmm
forever, and then
hmm
someone comes along and do they totally usurp you for that role, but they just totally then eclipse you with a whole other position that, in a sense, makes you irrelevant, because as the Kai, she was supposed to be the leader of her people.
right,
Now all of a sudden, here comes the emissary, and he is the leader. They look
right,
to him. She can say whatever she wants to, but if the emissary steps out and says, "No, we're going to do this,"
right,
all the Bajorans are going to do what he says.
yep, yep,
So yeah, that I again, this episode makes her quite compelling. It makes her understandable. And again, this is why I'm saying this episode is so important, because there are a lot of things that are going on here with these characters that this episode lets you know what's getting ready to happen. Like, all this stuff is coming up and will be important again.
right,
Kai Wynn being confused about who her enemies are and not understanding her place right now in the grand design of what the prophets want for her and from her
hmm
is huge. That's a huge point for the next, well, pretty much the rest of the show.
right,
Cisco and his odd connection to the prophets, and uh, what they're trying to get him to do, and his place in all of this. The rest of the show, that is going to be a central focus for the rest of it. Okay.
right,
Cassidy, who has been gone from us for, they say 6 months, but I really feel like it's been like a year. Um, she's back, and she was. If you did, you notice how like, um, and I know Vincent pointed it out here a minute ago, um, that Cassidy coming back should have been a bigger deal than it was,
Right.
and it was overshadowed completely by the visions that Cisco was having, but
Right.
also it forced her, or not, I guess not forced her, but it put her into a position to where she was intensely supportive of Jake and the Cisco family unit. So it
Hmm.
took a lot of pressure off of her trying to reestablish herself as this, like what the questions that we should have been asking about Cassidy were things like, where is she going to stay? I know that Cisco took care of that right away, but still, that should have been a question. What's her position? What's her title? Is she going to be a freighter
Right.
captain again? Where's her ship? Was her
Right.
ship impounded? Does she get that back now that she served her time or not? Is she that job that she was, aiming for and whatever else a while back? Is that job still available to her? Or not? Like, there's so many questions and uncertainty for her in that role, but they took care of all that because it was like it's pretty much established that she's now a part of their family unit. They're not living together, but it's basically them. That's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. As you point out at the end of the episode, is basically the three of them. She's back from her 6 months in prison running, stuff for the Marquis, which I have to say, 6 months doesn't sound like enough time, but whatever.
If I
Um,
remember correctly, I'm gonna have to go back and watch the episode, but I'm pretty sure she was supposed to serve 2 years.
and who else was it that only served 6 months for a sentence of some kind?
Garrick for genocide,
Yeah.
his attempted genocide, and for the striking of a
Oh,
Starfleet
that's what it
officer because he
was.
fought
Yeah.
Worf, and he was
I have
sentenced to
to
six
say,
months.
yeah,
The
man.
Federation justice system, man, they don't want
Yeah.
no. What
Yeah.
do you
I
what
mean,
do you mean jail time? No,
6 months is the maximum for traitors and
and And if you watch Star Trek Voyager, there's another person on Voyager who's, when we were introduced to the character, he's in prison. But where is his prison? It's a New Zealand penal colony, but it's the most luxurious penal colony I've ever seen. Tom Paris is doing some work for the Federation on their New Zealand penal colony, and when Captain Janeway shows up to recruit him, she's walking with him at one point to tell him about the mission she wants to recruit him for. Dude, it's like fresh mowed grass. There's birds chirping in the sunlight. He's just walking around out there. He's got to wear
I
an
I
ugly
commit a
jumpsuit.
crime for
That's what
that.
I'm saying. I was like, hell, take me to jail right now.
Yeah.
I mean, he's working. They're feeding him. He doesn't have to do anything. I mean, like, I was like, come on, come on.
Yeah.
And it's the most, right next to the beach. And it's
Hmm.
just like, come on. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll go to Federation prison. I'll go right now. I'll go right now.
Sign
So,
me up.
but yeah, Federation prisons, yeah, are clearly, I don't know. I don't want to say they're a joke because we don't know what the full whatever of them are. I'm
Right.
sure there's a lot of focus on rehabilitation and not doing it again. But yeah, it seems like everybody's sentence is commuted to 6 months. You attempted to commit suicide, 6 months in jail. You were a drug runner, or she was a gun runner. She was transporting
Well, did
weapons.
she run weapons? I thought she was only
Yeah,
running like
no, the first time she
resources.
was running medical supplies. The
Right.
second time when she got caught, it was
Ah,
weapons. It was
right.
weapons. So she
And who was
was
it? What's the guy's name? Eddington. I mean,
Eddington.
yeah, who
Eddington,
was turned
Michael
out to
Eddington.
be
He was the
the
real Maquis
Maquis.
spy, and
Yeah.
he used her to get his hands on the Class 5 replicators that were going to be sent to
Ah,
a then decimated Cardassia.
right.
So,
That's right.
yes.
Yep. We haven't seen him yet. I don't know if we'll see him anymore, but he's been gone for a bit. That was the last time
Yeah.
we saw Cassidy. And
Well,
if
it
the
hasn't
last, go
hasn't
ahead.
quite
Sorry.
because it hasn't quite been 6 months for old Michael Eddington yet. We seem to
Yeah.
be on a 6 month rotation. Garrett came back in 6 months. Cassie's back in 6 months. So
Yeah.
6 months and Eddington should pop up.
Right. It reminded me to mention. I think the last time we saw Kai Wynn was the same episode where we got introduced to who's Kira's boyfriend now, Shakar,
Shakar.
uh, who became first minister. But
Yes.
other than the episode where he came to help negotiate the Federation, joining the Federation, he wasn't in this episode. I mean, it was last season that he was in, so I don't know if we're going to see him anymore. I mean, him and Kira are supposedly still an item, but his absence in this episode is noticeable. as the supposed leader of Bajor.
Mhm.
I mean, Kai Wynn's
Yeah, you know
there,
what?
but
That's a good point because they're supposed to be doing this whole induction into the Federation. Why wouldn't your first minister be there?
especially
Um,
when part of the episode is we need the militia, we need the military of Bajor to be incorporated into the
we're
Federation.
yeah, we're also going to be looking for council members to sit on the Federation Council. Why
Right.
wouldn't your first minister be like the first person you choose,
Yeah,
or at
exactly.
least be in the talks with
Right, or
to
help
be
pick
in that
whoever that would
role?
be. Yeah, yeah, exactly. So his absence is noticeable. I mean, don't tell me, but a part of me wants to know. Part of me what does want you to tell me is if we're going to see him again, but I don't know if it matters or not. You know, we'll find out.
I
I
will.
mean,
I mean, it doesn't necessarily matter per se, but I will say yes, we do see him again.
good. Okay,
Yeah,
I hope so because I like him
yeah,
as a character.
yeah.
Um, I mean, it would have been hard to get him in there without him kind of shadowing Kai Wynn a bit, or at the very
And
least, just taking up space in the episode.
I
So
think
I
that might have also been why they. I think that might have been why they didn't do it because it having to have a justification for why he was there be and then like he would I mean there is a justification for having him, but
right,
if we then didn't use him very much because the focal point of the story was about Cisco and the prophets and trying to interpret the message they were giving him. This would
right,
have required a more spiritual component than a political one. So
right,
even though, yes, to our way of thinking, for the political aspect of what was going on, he should have been there.
right,
Shakar is too important a character to be a fly on the wall, basically.
right.
So that makes sense as to why he wouldn't
Yeah,
be
his
there.
absence makes sense on a just purely logistical reason. We don't have
Mhm.
time or space for his character to show up, so he's not here. However, I will say it would have been fun to get him there to have him and Kai Wynn kind of butt heads a little bit. You know, I don't think we should join the Federation, but I'm submitting to the emissaries, yada yada yada. But again, he wouldn't have had time to be in the episode, so it's okay that he's gone. Especially if he comes back later. I do want to see him again. Um, yeah. So, by the way, seeing as how we're an hour into the episode, do you think we should
Yeah.
mention that little password for
So
everybody?
I guess we should, since I've already said it twice in the episode. So if you were paying attention, you're probably like, yeah, he said the same thing here, but I will go ahead and say it. So as you all know, we are having a contest, and the contest is to win a Federation medallion that you can affix to any glass container. It just, it's metal, it has adhesive on there. You stick it on, and then bam, you've got an official Federation mug. Um, you can order one of these yourself, or you can participate in our contest and perhaps win one for free. So, all you'll have to do is comment the keyword or phrase that we use in both this episode and next week's episode. You can't just do one, you got to do both to be entered into the contest where you will be potentially picked, and then we'll contact you to send you the thing. But the key word for this episode is Paktemfar. So now I've said it 3 times. I'm going to say it again. So if you've listened, you should know what it is. In order to enter the contest, you must comment on the video the keyword, and then we will enter you in. It's just that simple.
Yeah.
Okay. And everything will be completely free for you. We will send you the medallion. You don't have to pay for it. You don't even have to pay for shipping. The only thing you have to do is run your little fingers across the keyboard and put in the key phrase there. And if you don't know how to spell it, Google is your friend. You can find it listed pretty much anywhere. I know that they've got it on Wikipedia. I also know that Memory Alpha has it written, and they also give you a nice little definition and a couple of other examples if you are interested in doing some kind of deep dive on the lore of it. So there you go. I said it twice earlier. Now I just said it again. So you're good to go. Good luck.
There you go. There you go.
So there, we've already got one person who's entered in who also spelled it correctly. So yeah, you can just copy and paste. And all we're gonna do is for every entry that we get, or not for every entry, because obviously if you write it a bajillion times, no. But we're just going to take your name, write it, put it in the hat, basically draw it out, and
Right.
then if you your name gets pulled, we'll reach out to you to get your information to send you the thing. If you don't respond to us, then we'll go and draw another name, and we'll do another name and another name and another name until we get somebody who responds. Well, we'll draw 3 times, and if no one responds, I'm not going to be drawing forever. We'll draw 3 times, and if no one responds, then we'll do something else later on. But there you
We'll
go. So
keep the medallion for ourselves. That's what.
yeah, yeah.
I don't know
I
how we're
don't
gonna
mind.
share it, but I know. Yeah.
It's we'll solder it in half.
There you go.
That's what we'll do. So um yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot about this episode. And obviously, like I said, there's so many things. Oh, well, we have to talk about the one thing, the uniforms. We started
Oh,
off and we said we're going to come back to it.
here we go.
As I said early on, these are to me the Apex Trek uniforms. I know there are plenty of people who are fans of the original series uniform. I know that the next generation uniform also has a lot of people who just love it. I know I was in that camp for a very long time. The variant of that we saw the most on Deep Space Nine, where instead of it being black on the shoulders and then the main color in the body, like on Next
Mhm,
Generation, in Deep Space Nine reversed that, and it was the color on the shoulders and then black in the main body.
mhm.
I was never really a fan of that. And then they took that and ran with it on Voyager,
Right.
but I was never really a fan of that. I do, however, like the dress uniforms, because the dress uniform is basically, again, the black shoulders, the color in the main body, and then it's the extra long version, and it has the little gold trim on the collar and lapel flap or whatever.
Mhm.
But these uniforms here are the best, with the gray, black body, and then the undershirt being
Yeah.
the color designation for the department that they work in.
Right.
Best look. It's the absolute best look. And then you've got the com badge, how it sparkles, how it shines. Such a crisp uniform. It looks great.
Hold on. I have to put one in for the running. Picard, when he gets his jacket and he starts rocking the jacket, what do
Uh,
you think?
I do like I like the Picard smoker jacket, but I don't like the overall look because whenever he
Right.
wore that jacket, the shirt he wore underneath it was this ugly. It was like black, but then it was gray
Right.
in the. But I didn't like that shirt. I hated
Yeah.
that shirt. I was like,
Yeah.
either make it all black or make it all gray. Don't give
Yeah.
me this weird like it looks like you tried to print a uniform from the replicator, but the uniform color was color cartridge was out.
Right.
I don't like that at all.
I always thought it
um,
was funny that he's the only one who has it because it makes sense. Like he's the captain, but it feels like it kind of it goes against the whole Federation like purpose of like everyone has the same uniform, only difference is color. And suddenly here comes Picard all decked out with his jacket and he's looking all fly, and you're like, I mean, I like
yeah.
it kind of, but now you feel out of groove with everyone else. Like
Well,
you're
and it
showing
also
off
makes
now.
it also made Picard just seem so weird and oddly stuffy that okay, even in your off time, you're still wearing some kind of uniform variant. You don't have a T-shirt you can put on, man. Something that says like "I grok with Spock" or something. I don't know, just something that shows that you're relaxing. You're
Right.
wearing a jacket of your uniform.
Right.
Like, do you ever relax, man, at all?
Right.
Like, come
Yeah,
on.
exactly. That's
So,
actually a
yeah,
great point too. Yeah. Yeah, it just takes like I'm always on duty to another level.
yeah. But then we see, and in this episode, not only do we see the new uniform, but we also see a variant of the uniform with Cisco wearing just the vest version with his
Yes.
red or burgundy undershirt and the
Yes.
arms and all that. He's got the vest.
Yes.
Great look, great
Yes.
variant of the uniform. It
Yeah.
just it works, man. I'm
Yeah.
like I really feel like it's a great one that could even be like dressed up and made
Yes.
into almost like a professional suit,
Right.
and you could probably go out somewhere and wear that thing and just look just very nice.
Yeah, the whole feel I get from everything about this uniform is it feels like, I mean, the most direct comparison of the opposite is like season 1 of TNG. Man, they look like PJs. And like I'm glad they update them pretty shortly thereafter. I think it's season 2 where they get the collar, right? Like they immediately get an upgrade
Yeah, I think it's like
and they
middle of
look,
season 2
yeah, and they
they
look much
start
more
wearing those.
professional once they get the collar going. I like the collar a lot whenever they get the collar in TNG. But
Yeah.
this one, not only does it look like a more professional outfit, it looks more serious, a little more, polished, but it looks like something that you could, like, it looks warm enough that if you were in a cold space like a Deep Space Nine space station. Maybe it's kind of cold
Mhm.
on there because the Cardassians like it cold. No, they like it hot or cold. They like it cold, don't they?
Cardassians like it hot, Bajorans like it cold, Trills like it cold, Klingons like it hot. Humans are just, we
Somewhere in
don't
the middle.
care. Yeah.
Okay. Well, anyway, my point is that it looks like a material that's very insulating. That it could help keep you warm, but it's not going to keep you too hot. It looks really insulating, and as you pointed out, you can take off an outer layer. Now, of course, maybe that kind of undoes the whole purpose of the previous versions, where it was one outfit that you could use in any situation. This one, now you're taking your jacket off because you're too hot or something, but it
I feel
still looks really good.
it does look really good, and I also feel like it adds a more realistic quality to a uniform because like the jumpers basically that they were wearing on Next Generation, it was like okay, once you got dressed for the day, that was it. You were
Right,
in that thing until you were off duty,
right,
and now we see that you can unzip your jacket for lunch or whatever, or you can be looking at spires in the in the holodeck and it's undone and you got the vest underneath and whatever. I mean, it just again it added a more realistic quality to the clothes that they use in this particular world that they're in.
right,
And again, it looks great. The color scheme is great.
right,
They just really nailed it, and all of them look good. It's not like the command one is the best or anything like that. That color scheme worked for all of the departments. So,
right.
and we'll see that as the episodes continue because they're going to use these uniforms for the rest of the run of the show. So we'll see that when other people are like when O'Brien takes his off and he's got the gold underneath. You get to see that variant there too. So yeah, it works, and we'll
Right.
get there.
Gotcha. Okay.
But yeah, I had to make sure that we talked about that. Now, also, we have to talk about because we've harped on them so much, and I can't believe that we missed it, but we'll do it right now. As Vincent pointed out, Jake was faced with a very, very tough decision.
Mhm.
We see the Cisco family kind of wrestling with this here when Cisco initially informs them that he wants these visions to continue. And he gives them, gives Jake in particular a very poignant speech about how he had watched Jake as a baby and how he, could kind of see his life unfolding. And now he feels like he's viewing this situation the same. He's looking at the universe in this kind of same, very, intensely introspective way, and he
Mhm.
wants it to continue.
Right.
And then as the visions are causing his brain to deteriorate and he eventually falls out in his unconscious, Jake has to make the decision of whether or not to go against his father's wishes
Right.
and to get him the surgery that he needs to survive, or allow his father to die because he wanted to see this thing through, as Jake directly says.
Right.
So the question was raised, whether or not we agree with Jake's decision.
Right.
um, I think it's important to note that again, Jake is as far as we can tell anyway, he is recognized as a full grown adult. He's 18
Right.
years old. He
Yes.
and obviously he's Ben's next of kin on the station,
Right.
so there's no need to worry about like why didn't they reach out to Joseph or anything like that. This is why Jake could make this decision.
Yeah. It's
Um,
actually that's a great point. He's been a minor.
Pretty much
17
the whole
the whole
time that we've
time, and
yeah, this is the first time that we've even heard them officially acknowledge him. He's an adult. He's an 18-year-old
right.
guy now, so
And we're gonna take your decision here and move with it. Like
right.
you get full authority to make the decision here.
Yes.
Yeah. Shout out to Vincent. He's I guess in our YouTube live stream, you can whenever you do live streams, you can talk, and it's fun having someone in the chat. That's great. So yeah, I would say that I agree with Jake's decision, but I don't quite fully agree with his reasoning. Of course, so the reason he's correct, I believe that Cisco would have died if he had ever reached that perfect state of nirvana. I think that in order for him to have achieved it, his physical body would have suffered to the point of death in order for his quote unquote spirit, or at least his visions, to be fully realized. So I think just Jake was right to say that no matter, I mean, even my father wouldn't be willing to die if that meant that's the realization of his visions is his death. He will still be able to live on and act on his visions and maybe experience them in the future, but he still has a purpose Even if Jake isn't operating from the sense of he's the emissary and has a spiritual purpose for the Bajoran people, as much as like he shouldn't die on behalf of these visions. That's not the he's not gonna if that's what it would actually cause is his death, then no, we don't want to have him die. Now the reason he gives of like he's my father and I don't want to lose him. I again, part of me feels like Jake is kind of in, and I fully understand this because he's still young. He's still, even though he's officially an adult, he's still a young man. So losing his father would be traumatic. But part of me still feels this kind of sympathy toward him as a character of like. I feel like he's kind of stuck. I mean, there's that episode where he had Nog back as a roommate, which was like what 2 episodes ago at least,
Hmm.
and it
No,
felt
it
it
was last episode.
was it last
The
episode.
Ascent. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I know it was like
that was last
yeah,
episode. The Ascent.
and Jake was he's kind of stuck. He's kind of having a hard time writing. He's kind of messy. Now again, he's 18. Anyone who's 18, like you go off to college, part of it is being kind of messy, and you have a college room, and you just kind of leave whatever. So I'm not saying like he's different than anyone else, but part of me really wants Jake to like embrace his life and like move on in some capacity, like not
Yeah.
just I don't want him to be just attached to his father and never like really grow into himself.
Hmm.
That episode, of course, was I think at the beginning of season 4, where we see him jumping into the future, his future
Yes.
self, and part of the his problems as an older
The
as
Visitor.
yeah, when he's a young a man, he gets married, but part of his life falls apart because he's stuck on getting back with figuring out what happened to his dad. But anyway, point is, yes, he was right to tell Bashir to take Cisco and do the surgery, and I thought it was fun. Yeah, the whole like his polar something or other, like his polarity is messed up. I just love that sort of mumbo jumbo, like maybe when we get down to the quantum level, we'll have polarity on some level. His poles are misaligned, but like in modern surgical lingo, I imagine that doesn't make a bit of sense. Like what? But of course, it's 24th century technology. What are we talking about?
Right. Now, I will say, for me, I too agree with Jake's decision to save his father's life. I feel like uh, it makes the most sense because Cisco's brain had clearly been altered, and he wasn't thinking like the person that we've come to know up to this point. As we've remarked several times, Cisco's main focus has always been Jake and raising his son. And so as you watch this episode and as these visions get more and more, distinct and become a bit more obsessive for him, other things start to lose their importance. He's not doing his job. He's spending a lot of time in the holodeck. I mean, he ate, but he's now playing with his food. He doesn't go and meet Kai Wynn when she shows up, and he should have. And we initially are like, well, that's because it's Kai Wynn and she's a jerk,
Right.
whatever. But
Mhm.
the reality is he's shirking his responsibilities. When the admiral calls, he's down on Bahala. He's not on the station to greet him.
Right.
Like all these things are just evidence of this not being the Cisco that we've come to know and
Right.
understand. He's always been a very honorable, duty driven individual. And for him to suddenly cast all of that aside for
Mhm.
this other thing, it shows that there's been an alteration in the man.
Right. Yeah.
Um, and to me, I like that Jake. That it seems like Jake kind of recognized that, and it's like if his father was in his right mind and making these kind of choices, he probably would have explained things a bit more to Jake, and it would have made Jake okay with his father going off and doing whatever. But the
Right.
lack of explanation, the lack of connection between them in this episode is why that doesn't work, but why it works for the story,
Right.
because that is one of the things those two have been very consistent about, is their bond, is their connection. And we see it's broken in this episode. It's absolutely broken, and it's just like that's not Ben. That's not Jake. That doesn't make any sense, you
Hmm.
know. And so when Jake is like, yeah, I need you. He needs that back. He needs to see that connection and move on with that. Like I agree with what you're saying too about Jake and the fact that yeah, we recognize him as an adult, but he seems stuck in what he wants to do.
Right.
But I think that's where his relationship with his father would help him out in that regard, and this is the time that he should be getting that, and instead his father's pulling away from him. He's distancing himself from him, but not in a good way, not in the okay, it truly is time for my son to grow up and be a man and leave the nest and so forth.
Right.
It's almost like he's just you're not important, and that's not Ben.
Yeah, he's distracted this episode, and
Yeah,
that affects his relationship with Jake.
yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So I like that Jake makes that decision. I again I really like the end where when Cisco comes back and he's kind of hesitant at first, but then again upon connecting with Jake, like the physical connection, taking his hand, and they get closer together, seeing that they've reestablished that bond, and just that simple thing just kind of shows that Jake made the correct decision.
Hmm.
And it's just it's a touching moment. I really love how they treat their family dynamic, and it's even though that wasn't the focal point of the episode, it kind of becomes that at the end because it's Jake making these decisions for his father, and Jake caring for his father in the way that his father was always caring for him. So we kind of see a little bit of a role reversal here for the two of them. So it's just I just think it was all done very well. And
Hmm.
but yeah, to answer the question, I agree with Jake's decision. Would I have done the same thing? I don't know, because if my parent was talking to me about having visions from God beings, I don't know how I would handle that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I would like to think that if we take that element out of it, and if my parent was suffering and was sick, and there was something that could be done to save their life, that I would make that decision and not I would make that decision to save their life versus letting paranoia or a deranged request, from a sick mind, stop me from having that person back.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a important point. Like when someone says, "I want to do this medical thing," I made this medical decision. It overriding their medical choice is a big deal. I guess the biggest example of that would be like uh, if you're on like life support and like let me die kind of thing.
Yeah, termination,
Um,
right to life, right?
yeah,
Like someone has said that. Maybe they've
right,
only said it, but they've never
right,
written it down. They've never done anything else where they've said to you, I want, if I ever get to the point where I'm so sick and I can't respond,
right,
don't let them have heroic measures and to save me or keep me going, or that's let me go, let me die,
right.
whatever. And then they come to you and they're like, what do you want to do? You have power of attorney or whatever that phrase is they use in those situations.
Hmm.
Yeah, could you do it? Could you let that person go, or could you, or be like, nah, I want to save their life. I want
Right,
to, you know. So because that's what it comes down to. Because Cisco told him, and even Julian says, because Admiral Watley tries to order him to do the surgery,
yeah.
and and yeah,
Bashir says
Bashir is
no.
like, yeah, I can't because he's already refused.
Right.
So I can't go by what you say. I have
I
to go
have to
by
go
what
by
the
Jake.
family
Yeah,
says. So
yeah,
interesting way to suddenly shift that focus onto Jake, because I wasn't expecting it. I remember when I watched this the first time, and I was fully expecting this to suddenly become a showdown between the admiral versus the doctor's ethics. But then
ooh,
he turned and he was like, next to kin. I
yeah,
was like, ooh, Jake,
yeah,
forgot you were there for a second. Step right
yeah,
up. Yeah.
yeah,
So again, great episode. Great episode.
yeah,
It's no wonder that it took us, almost an hour and a half to cover everything that's in it.
yeah.
So
There's
yeah.
a lot. Yeah.
So now that the episode is over, you get to go watch First Contact.
Oh boy.
So
I might do it tomorrow
I was
to
gonna say
get the
you don't have to do it tonight, but
yeah.
you should watch it. And
Because tomorrow's Christmas Eve. We're recording on the
yes,
23rd, so tomorrow Christmas Eve, and I'm off from work, so tomorrow is a great day to do it.
okay.
Maybe you and I will have a chance to record here the next few days. We can get that after
Well,
dark episode out.
I don't have to work. You know, I know we're like just spitballing here, so bear with us for all you people that are live, of course. So to speed up the thing, so they don't have to sit here and listen to me hem and haw about it. Yes, let's go ahead and do it. If you watch First Contact tomorrow.
Mhm.
After you're done, we will do a special about First Contact.
Okay.
If you want to watch us live do this special, then you'll have to tune in tomorrow to our YouTube channel. Otherwise, if you're just content to wait until the episode comes out, it will be out in 2 weeks. Okay, so we will record it on Sunday, but it will not come out until January, what is that? January 6th will be when the After Dark for First Contact comes out. Okay, so
Yeah.
there you go.
Okay.
All
All
right.
right.
Well, guys, as always, we are so glad that you all were tuning in and listening to us and watching us. And for those of you that were contributing to us, of course, we appreciate all of that. You now know about our contest. You now know how you can enter to win. You also know that David has finished War and Peace, and that we will not only be covering First Contact in an After Dark special, but we will have our the Expanse, Nemesis games after Dark as well, which will probably also be in January because David reads incredibly fast, and I'm actually done for once. So, yeah, so we'll have a lot to talk about with you all coming up. I hope that you're just as excited as we are. Remember that you can find us and follow us anywhere that you happen to do the social medias, and you can listen to us anywhere you happen to listen to podcasts. I do it on Spotify. So, guys, until next week, take care of yourselves.
Thanks, guys.